Hi guys, I'm Greg Alba.
And I'm John Humphrey.
We are going to do our Avengers Endgame spoiler talk over there. But before we move over there, I wanted to give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, which is AMINO Apps. John, show them the phone.
What, this phone? We've recommended the Marvel AMINO a few times on this channel, and now that the Endgame is here, it's the perfect place to discuss all things Marvel with fans from across the world.
If you're not familiar, AMINO is a massive network of online communities and message boards for fans and creators alike.
Whether you're into Marvel, Supernatural, Game of Thrones, or anything else really, chances are there's a community of like-minded peeps ready to engage with you on AMINO.
The app allows you to post blogs and polls, chat live, share fan art, compete across leaderboards, and a whole lot more.
And now AMINO's getting even better thanks to their new AMINO Stories feature.
Watch fans and creators alike share their thoughts and creativity through fast and fun in-app videos.
We actually just posted one about our dream Avengers teams, and you can too!
To download the app for free on Android or iOS, simply just click the link below in the description box or the pinned comment and follow the instructions.
Once you've got the app, you can search and join the Marvel AMINO, and don't forget to follow us at Real Rejects.
Real Rejects.
That's right.
Sorry.
Don't forget to follow us at Real Rejects, all one word.
Now, let's hop into those spoilers now, shall we?
All right, now that we're moved over here, let's move on to that spoiler talk. So we saw this twice, and when I was on the John Cameo show, I put something about this on our community page that I put on Twitter, at the Greg Alba. When I was on John Cameo show, one of the questions he asked was like, where would I rank this? And I really emphasized that I feel like I need to watch this twice before I rank this. I had a feeling, but oftentimes there are movies that I've loved out of the MCU that when I rewatch it, I'm like, I liked it more the first time. This movie undoubtedly is my favorite Marvel movie. I can talk for hours. We're not going to, but I can talk for many hours about just why I think this is the best movie. And we're gonna go through it, and because the thing is, I can go through like literally every single moment. So what we have is bullet points for Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and we'll go through all the big stuff that goes on in it. But I really love it because of the fact that its tone, in more than just like cool fan service, it just seems so damn well constructed. It blows my mind how well they stuck the landing to the point of not only did it meet my expectations, but somehow it completely surpassed my expectations. And I can't think of, out of all the 22 films, of an MCU film that has such an emotional punch throughout this whole film. There's so much emotions generated. Like, I've cried so many different times, and I also love the pacing of it, of how it just slowly starts and just builds and builds and builds, and then you get to the big finale action, and then before that big finale, there's barely any action before that. In terms of like fight scenes, there's only a couple I can really think of, and they're very short lived. So I'm so blown away by this, and I think John and I are pretty much on the same page about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly where I don't know, to sit down and rank all the Marvels would be kind of an undertaking, but yeah, I think this is definitely one of their, for me, most distinct movies, definitely one that just pulled me in and had me from beginning to end, and where it's weird because there's so much hype and expectations attached to this movie, and it has such a landing to stick. And so it's funny to me because it made me forget about my expectations while I was watching it. And I think that's a special thing to have happen. And especially in a time where it's easy to be cynical and easy to predict these kinds of things. It's a movie that gave me as many surprises as rewards.
Yeah.
And yeah, I kind of got what I was hoping for, along with a bunch of really wonderful gifts along the way. And yeah, like you said, it is a very emotional story because it really hones into the impact that all of this is having on the characters and the true heroism in the face of major defeat. And so yeah, I think this definitely is perhaps the most Marvel cinematic universe-y Marvel
I
Cinematic
think
Universe
it's the
movie.
best representation of what the MCU is.
Yeah.
I don't really like that criticism with any MCU movie of, well, the one negative to it is you need to have seen these other Marvel movies in order to understand it. I'm like, that's kind of the point of what makes the MCU such a special thing that other franchises have the hardest time replicating with cinematic universe building. And I just, to me, I'm like, if this was a show, this would be the best. If this was the season finale to a show, this would be the best episode.
Particularly memorable season finale. Yeah.
And so going into it, starting off with Act 1, like right away from the opening scene of Hawkeye. The reason I really appreciate it hit me hard yesterday when we rewatched it, of why I love this opening so much. Because it's more than just, we got to reestablish the decimation, you know, it's more than that. And it's more than, you know, what was Hawkeye up to? It's showing the very human level of loss of the people who had zero clue of what the hell is going on. They had because in the end of Infinity War, you know, you're seeing this like giant chaotic battle and everyone's trying to kill Thanos and he suddenly snaps and all the characters we've been tuning in with this whole time are starting to vanish and disappear. And sure, we get like a nugget of a post-credit scene with Maria Hill and Nick Fury. But this moment really puts you in the human drama, the human level of there's just this family having a good day, and then suddenly, what the fuck's happening? You know?
Yeah, it's a nice little, almost Twilight Zone-y little moment, because it is sweet and it is an endearing, just life slice that then brings you back into the stakes in a completely different tone. And it makes a wonderful little prologue for the movie, and especially after the big deal they made about, like, where was Hawkeye? Where was Ant-Man? Like, this movie uses those aspects really well, I thought. And to join back up with Clint as, you know, his family dusts really is heartbreaking. You know?
It's the perfect opening for me. That's one of the things.
Literally, meanwhile, back on Earth. You know,
it's one of the things I love about this movie so much is everything felt so well thought out that they thought what is most necessary at this point. And what scene is most necessary? What's necessary to put in the scene? You know, I love that.
Oh yeah, there's no room for fat really in this movie.
And then going into like Captain Marvel saving Tony and Nebula, but even before that, you know, you're with Tony and Nebula. They have them killing the time where they're playing like the football game with the paper football game.
Yeah.
I really love the tone established that it was from the first trailer when you see the Iron Man helmet. When you're watching the movie, you're like, wow, we're really just looking at this helmet for a while. You know, little things like that are things I really appreciate with this film, of how much time they're going to take with each scene and let it really breathe, that really feel that isolated environment and that feeling of loss. And so yeah, when you give that message to and also with their dynamics, it's kind of cool visual storytelling instead of having to do a lot of, you know, what's the rapport been like? Like you get one moment where they're playing paper football, and then you get another moment where Nebula is, you know, tucking Tony into his seat so he can sleep a little bit better because they think they're gonna die because their ship is run out of gas at this point. You know?
Yeah. Well, and even though I didn't pick it up in the trailer, but even the way that Tony is just so frail, which is what would happen to you, not eating and, you know, drinking much, but also in space, you know, like your muscles start to deteriorate and you atrophy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they really do a good job of putting you in the shoes of these moments. They let them breathe.
Yeah, and I think also with Captain Marvel saving Tony, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. You know, it's not just like, it was funny in the press screening, no one clapped, but in opening night audiences, everyone clapped. When that moment comes out.
I feel like people appreciated Captain Marvel more on opening night.
Yeah, and I think with the post-credit scene of Captain Marvel, and it kind of just makes sense to me when you think about it, with Rocket, and that's his ship, that he would probably have some way of at least tracking his ship, but it's so far away that they probably can't get to it, you know? So I like when Captain Marvel saves him, but even right there in that gritty drama of when Iron Man reunites with the team, you know, kisses Pepper, and he's with Cap, and he's like, I lost again, because in Civil War he lost to Cap, and then he loses to Thanos here, and when he's just sort of breaking down the next day when he's on the Ivy.
Yo,
That whole moment, I find it funny how there was that whole vision sequence, not the character vision, but in Age of Ultron, where he has that vision.
just everybody dead in that pile. Yeah,
because this movie wants to wrap up everything of how they. Like, that was one of the things that when I first watched it, I'm like, oh shit, they acknowledged it. They brought it up. They brought up the vision. And on a rewatch, you're like, oh, okay, that's all they needed to do, I guess. Was just acknowledge it. Is it really that's not what happened. Like, the vision that took place is not what happens in this movie or even in Infinity War.
Yeah.
You know?
But it doesn't necessarily have to be, because it is kind of a romanticized vision. It's a stylized vision.
Definitely. And then when they go to kill Thanos, that moment, I've noticed there's been a lot of people who feel very much in conflict with when Thanos is killed. Because I like when you catch up with him, how he's just living the farmer life. Yeah. You know? And on a rewatch, I noticed even other little nuggets that I just didn't catch up on before. Like when he first starts walking up the stairs to his home, he's limping. Showing how injured he is, you know? Yeah. And
all those little details,
And then when they show up, and then, when they're fighting him, and then they find out about the stone, how Thanos used the stones to obliterate the stones. I am inevitable.
Yeah.
And then Thor goes for the head, chops off his head.
But it doesn't matter now.
Both times we've watched it, the crowd gasps because you're like, that's not what I expected.
That scene had a very distinct writing flair to me, because I noticed they said we're going to kill Thanos, and they pointedly both amputate his hand and then behead him, and it's one of the more, I think, directly, overtly violent things that has happened in a Marvel movie.
Well, that's one of their
or at least with the violent spirit to it.
That's one of their Star Wars callbacks that they do in a lot of their Marvel films, is the chopping off the hand. But within the context of this, you don't think back to that Marvel thing that they do to pay tribute to Star Wars, because they're thinking of the Infinity Gauntlet, and how that's on his hand. But when people gasp because, and then you do this 5 years later jump, and from talking with people, I noticed people have had different responses to it. Some people found like, oh gosh, is this going to be a disappointing film? Like the fact that we're doing like Thanos just kill off in the beginning. For me personally, when they kill off Thanos right away, when I'm like, what the fuck? And then they do 5 years later, my first thought, and I think I said this out loud in the press screening, was, this is so cool, because this is going to be nothing like what I thought it was going to be. As I really thought we were just going to be like this badass movie, maybe with some time travel involved to get the stones so they could have Infinity Gauntlet versus Infinity Gauntlet at the end. But I thought it was just going to be a movie about them gearing up so they can take down Thanos. In the end, you get that finale battle. And then when you do that 5 years later jump, it's hard I got nipple chills from it right now. It's just like that was so unexpected. It'd be one thing if it was like a month later or even 6 months later, but 5 years means, damn, these characters, they're going to be so different. Yeah.
You lived in the aftermath. To them, this is just the way the world is now.
Yeah. You even get that cameo from Joe Russo in there at the meeting of people coping one another. And people were like clapping and stuff and laughing so hard just because he was there that I didn't even pick up on that. Oh, this is the subtle dialogue. He's a gay character. I don't know. I didn't catch up on that the first time.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool, we got a gay character in here, and it's Joe Russo.
Man himself.
And then when Ant-Man comes back, I like that. See, that's the thing. That 5 years later gap makes a big difference, because if this was a month later or 6 months later or whatever, the whole thing with the rat going over the control system in order to open up the quantum realm vortex thing in the van, I feel like that would have just felt like a convenient thing.
A lot less. It's still convenient that the rat was able to trigger the, bring him back sequence. But I will say, the 5 years does make the likelihood of a rat turning on the machine a lot more plausible.
Yeah, because it wasn't just like, oh, you did this at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you did it.
Yeah.
At all, I guess, but what good does it do us now?
I mean, when Ant-Man returns and him trying to, figure out what the hell is going on with the world.
I love that sequence.
And when he goes to, what does it say? The Vanished on all the...
Vanished, and he's looking at the monument.
Like, where's Is Cassie? Please not Cassie, Scott Lang. When he reunites with Cassie Lang and she's older, that both times I've seen it, that really makes me cry.
I love that moment. That showcases just how natural Paul Rudd can be. because like there's when they're on the porch together, there's so little dialogue in it, and it holds you at bated breath because I'm like, how is this moment gonna wrap? And it's the perfect. You're so big, like it's one of those perfectly bittersweet life moments.
Yeah,
and I love that this movie takes so much time for those.
Oh, absolutely. It's a beautiful scene. It's a very, very beautiful scene. And I also really picked up on this the second time we watched it. When you cut back to Black Widow and she's talking with like Okoye, Captain Marvel with a new haircut, you know, like, hey, what's the status of everything like that? I love that moment when she's talking with Rhodey. About all these cartel people are dead. They know it's Clint. And you just see these tears in her eyes of just how much she really cares so much about him and
how pained she is to see him go down this path.
The thing I picked up on the second time was the foreshadowing moment.
When you pick up a lot of foreshadowing about a lot of things the second time.
When Black Widow says, when Cap is sitting down with her and says, we both need to get a life. And she says, you first. And then funny enough, I mean, we'll go more into it later, but, you know, Black Widow dies in this movie. And then Cap is the one who gets a life.
Well, that's the other
brilliant. It's so thought out.
And that's the other thing across the board that just gets more rewarding about this film on a second viewing is that so many jokes dovetail around, you know, and so many little moments are called back to or paid off in ways that are not in your face, but that are clever and that are well timed.
True. You know, going with the whole time machine element. I love when
time heist.
I love when these movies just acknowledge, you know, what it is they're doing. You know.
And I like that this one bothered to set up a different set of time travel mechanics to work off of. I mean, I don't know what theoretical science they may or may not be based on, but that whole scene where they acknowledge a whole bunch of other movies and go, don't think of the time travel like all of these movies.
People to this day are. I mean, to this day, it's only the weekend, but people.
But after seeing the movie, people
still get confused, and the movie really went out of its way to try to say it's not this rule, but people still do get confused. And I surprisingly wasn't confused, and I normally in a situation like this I would be confused, but to me it just sort of feels like alternate timelines and that it's just one. It's hard to explain it. I'm not going to try to explain it. You can figure it out, right? But when you catch up with Tony and his daughter Morgan, I love that. See, that 5-year gap allows for organic growth after all this. If this, all of us thought it might be like 6 months later or something. No one expected 5 years, but that 5 years makes such a huge difference in terms of how everyone is, that for all these people to be so different at this point makes that much more sense. Because we've got time to live with, they're lived in this world post like decimation, right?
They've just accepted this reality now, and the psychological ramifications that come with it, you know.
And I like the dynamics that Tony has with his daughter, you know. She's very adorable, you know. She's not exactly like the most layered daughter in the world, but it's not about that. It's more about Tony's feelings for his daughter.
They're just sweet, gentle moments.
I love you 3000. I say it to John every night.
Well, yes, you do. And every time I threaten to sell all your toys.
And that's another thing, like, as we talk about this movie, I'm sure we'll be going into it a little bit more. But the foreshadowing of Tony, like not foreshadowing, but the setting up that Tony's going to die. Because if you look back at the first Iron Man and how he's always grown, Tony Stark, he started off as just this very insanely selfish, narcissistic dude who was a playboy, you know, sleeps around with women and everything. And then when you see him in this movie, he's married, he's retired, he's not living in the mansion, billionaire lifestyle anymore. He settled down on this like house by a lake. He's got a family, he's got a daughter. He's so changed, and his whole arc here is how he grows to be completely selfless. And I love that element here. And even with Tony and Pepper talking with one another, after he figures out the time travel element, how he says how she doesn't even try to argue with him about it.
Oh yeah, the greatest failure of my life has been trying to get you to stop or whatever.
I fucking love that.
And even the thing about, and I like that scene as well for the small notes of it, because the whole thing about, and I think you touched upon it, was his ability to rest. He's like, she says to him, if you put it in a safe and drop it to the bottom of the lake and go to bed and forget about it, will you be able to rest? Will you be able to let that off your mind?
Great
and then
dialogue.
That comes back at the end. And it's just, you pick up on so many more of those. And what's great too about the foreshadowing is that you watch it the first time And the foreshadowing, I think, in my opinion, is done with enough finesse that the first time you know it's there in certain instances, but you don't know exactly where it's pointing you. And then the second time you watch it, you really see these subtle ways in which each little bit of foreshadowing is guiding you along through the story. And it's really well assembled.
We're just in Act 1.
We're just
Act 1.
And this is a lot. There's a lot.
And I was right. And the thing is, I don't feel. I like going into. I've never felt so compelled to go so into depth about a Marvel movie before.
Yeah.
And then get into Professor Hulk, like who has the bigger brain? And they never call him Professor Hulk in here, but it's so obvious. Inspired by the Professor Hulk element.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and that was such a treat.
Mark Ruffalo's the way his Hulk has just consistently evolved in this franchise is great. From that's my secret cap. I'm always angry to brooding Hulk, and then from Thor Ragnarok Hulk. Fire. And then going into this version of the Hulk. You see, if this was 6 months later or something, or even a year, this probably wouldn't have felt so right. But because it's 5 years, you're like, oh, you probably had time to figure out how to have this happen. I think the CGI on him is incredible. Yeah. I'm never distracted by it. I'm never pulled out. There are times where you got such close-ups on him that I swear it's practical,
Yeah. I mean, and that's what another fun thing about this kind of movie, because this is a flagship. Everything is going to be firing at top notches, and not all of the effects are seamless, but that's kind of the fun part to me once I step back, is going, wow, like things like Professor Hulk that just look so photoreal and so convincing, and and that have the texture of skin and all that stuff.
And I love the gentle giant element to him.
And that moment, I think the second time worked a lot better, jumping ahead in the third act when he's like mocking his whole image to try and blend in and is really not into it anymore, like
because he's so funny in there. Or even the moment with because this movie, as much as I love the emotional depth in here, the humor really hits.
There's a lot of it,
and that moment where Rocket and Nebula show up and the tacos fly out of Ant-Man's, like how he just has the shell and everything just leaves the taco.
I love that transitional bit, because that was almost just like a little comic strip plopped into the middle of the movie, because it's just a perfect bit.
And then also when because a big part of Professor Hulk, when he shows up and he just gives him the two tacos.
It's like and he just walks off happy as could be, like Bruce is at peace. Like, it's so great.
I feel like Mark Ruffalo just had the most fun doing this.
Yeah.
You could feel it. And I like how he looked like Mark Ruffalo too. Yeah. He didn't just look like the Hulk. I like that it was a good blend of Hulk meets, because that's the whole point of the character. Yeah. That it is Bruce Banner meets Hulk all merged into one. That was great. And then of course, when they're like riding on the back of the truck with a rocket.
Oh god, and the sparks are coming out because they're so low on the suspension.
Yeah, they go to
New Asgard.
They got a new Asgard. Which I know that's kind of what happened. I think something like it happens in the comics. They go to Arizona and they build a new Asgard. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, right? Because that's one cool thing to me about this too, is that I've read the Infinity Gauntlet comic a couple times, but to me this feels less like, oh, this is based on a comic, and more like this is an MCU film.
Very much so. And actually, that's what shouts out to Totally Jumbled from the Patreon, because that's kind of.
I think I just took his thought.
He kind of made a similar remark about that.
So then you get to see Fat Thor, right? Big Lebowski Thor, and I know some people are a little bit conflicted about how they feel about this version of Thor.
I get it.
Some people think it's funny at first, but they thought he might go back to being in shape like halfway through. I personally love it. I love the choice, because 5-year gap, all the guilt and regret if he just got a little bit higher, went for his head. Because Russo's had talked about that before this movie, of how Thor feels guilt over the choice because of his ego to just go for the heart instead of going for the head. He wanted that moment. If he had just gone for the head, none of this would have happened. So
you understand why he is so distraught, and I do appreciate. It's like I get why you would be conflicted about Fat Thor for the entirety of the film, and for a few minutes at least, I was like, I bet he's gonna get buff again in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I like that they at least bothered to put an emotional underpinning to that and pay it off still. So it may clash with the rest of the movie for some people. I can see that, because the thing is, having Fat Thor around makes him always kind of funny. And then later on in the film, you'll notice that they'll start shooting him in certain ways to conceal some of that laugh factor, I think. But yeah, it's a completely unexpected detail that becomes its own little side story, and I did appreciate it, and it seemed within Thor's character, or
especially with what they've been doing with Thor lately, and the whole setup that they have later on. You shouldn't be striving for, who you're supposed to be. Just be the best of who you are. Yeah. And because that's his whole conflict within himself. So to me, it's so in tune with character. And to me, this is the right way you subvert expectations. Yeah. Like almost every moment of this is how you properly subvert expectations, right?
Yeah.
And even the moment with like Hulk and Thor, because of how Hulk says, you saved me, you helped me out, or even that little nugget of a moment where Thor has his hand on Hulk, and Hulk is just saying,
please take your
Hulk could do something, but he's being very kind about it. And then I'm not sure exactly what moment this takes place, but when you do get to the Hawkeye, people can call him Hawkeye, I call him Ronan. So I feel like that's what the rendition is we're doing.
Clint.
Call him Clint, right?
Clint Barton.
Because when you get to that Clint fight, that's probably the first fight of the movie. Right?
Probably. I mean, unless you count them restraining Thanos, but not really,
Yeah, it's like a few seconds. Yeah. But that Hawkeye fight, that was a really cool fight.
Yeah.
And I love the shots of just kind of watching the reactions at moments.
Oh, there's a beautiful one long take, up great through the different levels of the city.
Really using the colors of Tokyo in that moment.
Like very John Wick.
Yeah, and then when he has the one-on-one fight with that actor who I've seen in a lot of stuff.
Guy from The Last Samurai, Sunshine, and a whole bunch of other things.
And that's all in one shot, too, that whole fight. And they got pretty violent when he cuts his throat. They were smart with the gore there, because it doesn't start bleeding a lot till he has his hand over it.
Down his hand.
Yeah, you don't see like a big slash in his throat. Dark. Yeah, and then he kills him, and I love that scene when him and Black Widow reunite of like, please don't give me hope.
Oh, yeah. It's weird.
This is such a personal... If you watch our first reactions, that's all I've ever wanted from this was, I want this to be the most personal Avengers movie we've ever gotten. And it fucking delivered that for me. Yeah.
Yeah, which is fascinating too, because when you look at Infinity War, because it's so jam-packed, it is not as personal. And also Thanos' whole MO, he says it multiple times, it's not personal. And so to have that contrast from Infinity War to this movie makes a lot of sense too. Hyper personal movie, because everybody's story, like there's action, but it's mostly about people's emotional stakes.
So as this movie is like, now we're getting into like more of Act 2 territory. As this movie what I think is really neat about this movie is I feel like there's 3 acts, and each act is like 40 to 45 minutes long, and then you get like a closing 20 minutes or something. I don't know. I wasn't looking at my phone and timing it. It just felt that way to me, right? So when you get into the whole, all right, we're gonna start having some fun now. It's not just a that's what I mean. They really thought this out about building it up. Let's let the first act be really dark and sad, and then let's slowly get there. That we'll get to some hope elements now that we've figured out the time travel stuff.
We've got a plan.
Tony calling Thor Lebowski. Great call. Because that's exactly what it seems like they're riffing off of.
Well, I thought that was an all right moment too, because the I cracked time travel thing is a little hard to sell in one scene, but I thought the way they handled that with Tony too was a nice thing. Yeah, and him, looking at the picture of Peter, remembering we have to make that Spider-Man sequel, and deciding to save the world.
So when they start doing the time travel stuff, right? Is there anything else we're missing before we go into that we really need to touch on?
No, I think we got this.
So when they get to the time travel element, that was so cool. I mean, we knew that would happen because we had seen those leaked set photos. But even still, when you get to that moment, I thought the way they handled all of it was so neat. Like all the time travel stuff definitely felt reminiscent of Back to the Future 2. There's even a very specific moment that I didn't realize was like, oh, this moment is straight out of Back to the Future 2. There, when Tony gets hit with the door from the Hulk.
All right.
That's what happens with Marty McFly when he loses the almanac. Yeah. Yeah, the second time I watched, I'm like, oh, that's right out of Back to the Future too. Oh, going to that second, right?
Yeah. Which I guess that's nice because they call Back to the Future bullshit a couple times.
And shouts out to Andrew Gordon for saying that they're going to be referencing that.
Yeah,
he pretty much knew that. But what I thought was neat about the way they handled all that was more than just, oh, look how cool it is, we're revisiting it. They used it to enhance the plot. And in a lot of ways, it actually enhanced some of the movies that we might not even like Thor: The Dark World. They kind of made it better in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
you know, with
at least acknowledging and tying them in and making them feel a bit more necessary and worthwhile.
That time travel element. I've never been the guy who wants to binge watch these MCU movies. I'm like, we're gonna get another one, or we're gonna get another one. I don't feel like binge watching these every fucking year. I've never wanted to be that guy. Yeah. I've never wanted, not even for Infinity War. But when we did that made me suddenly go, I want to start from the beginning. I want to see every little nugget of Infinity Stones that we've ever heard of, because now it's all becoming complete right here.
Every 10 years, I want to do a Marvel marathon. And I think that's an appropriate amount of time to watch 22 movies.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you know, like there's a lot of ways they could have handled it. I like the different outsider perspectives that you get from each one of these moments where you're in the 2012 Avengers movie. You see kind of like, oh, here's how they handled the Loki arrest. Yeah. And so, I mean, I figured the best way to talk about this is just kind of go one at a time.
Yeah. Totally.
So, it's cool to just to see that moment with Loki and like, oh yeah, there is that moment where, okay, how do we handle what we're going to do with Loki? You know?
Yeah.
You know, and
grabs the Tesseract and all that.
Yeah. And I thought it was so cool to me how they disguise what would become an essential plot point with Hulk, you take the stairs. Like, it's just a funny moment.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Hulk, take the stairs. You see him going down the stairs later and bitching about the stairs. And you think it's just a funny thing that's not really going to factor in, you know? And, you know, when Robert Redford shows back up, I thought that was great to see him there. Any of these little cameos that you get was wonderful. And then when Tony gets the Tesseract, and like I was just saying, when he gets hit with the door that's right out of Back to the Future 2, loses Tesseract. And, of course, Loki takes the Tesseract, vanishes away, and maybe that's the Loki that's going to segue into whatever the Disney streaming service show is going to be for the guy.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. And that could be, you know, especially with the way they lay out their time travel dynamics, I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah. And the Cap and Winter Soldier callbacks when he gets in the elevator.
Yeah.
Everyone in there was like, in both screenings were like, oh shit, he's going to redo the fight. You know?
Yeah, and that's, see, this movie in some ways made me think of Star Trek Into Darkness, because I remember people complaining distinctly about the way in which they mirrored moments from Wrath of Khan. And I really appreciated the way that this movie would mirror previous moments, because I thought they did it in a really nice kind of alternate reality sort of way where it was subtle, but, you know, a nice nod as well.
And it was cool because that was also the Russo brothers' first Marvel movie too.
Yeah.
And when he says like Hail Hydra instead of getting into a fight, I like it because you're showing that he's using less, you know, he's using his brains a lot more, you know.
And in a mission where you have to be as low profile as possible.
And even when he fights himself, which was really fucking cool, like Cap versus Cap, and you could see the growth of Captain America to where he is now from that moment, and it's done to me in a rather subtle way of when he goes, I could do this all day, and he's like, I know. You know? Yeah. Or even when they're getting into their fight, which is a badass fight,
the spirit of America future versus the spirit of America past.
But when he's able to win, when he says Bucky's alive, because showing that, you know, of how I don't know what the word would be, like feeling a little bit.
He catches them off guard,
or something.
Like, here's something I know would at least cause me to hesitate for a half.
Yeah.
No, he's using his smarts.
But that joke about that is America's ass. You don't think he's gonna say it. You know, like you don't notice that he's looking at us. Like the way they frame that shot is great because you don't know that. Oh, that's the joke he's gonna say.
Yeah. One and I appreciated that a lot of the bits and homages of this movie take place in ways where you don't necessarily know they're happening just yet, or you don't necessarily either they don't call only attention to that. It's like they're usually in the midst of other things happening, which is nice.
And then with Thor going back to Asgard, I it seems like Natalie Portman showed back. She was at the premiere. So,
Was she? Okay, because
yeah.
I was wondering if that was like a deleted scene
Oh, yeah.
that they just used a few shots from, or if she just showed up to collect that Marvel money.
But I was cool that Thor really got to have a resolution with his mom in that
Higa,
moment.
is that her name? I don't know.
Honestly, I forget.
He gets a resolution with her, and he gets to kind of resolve at least his feelings on Jane too.
Well, that also sets up the arc for where Thor's going to land by the end of this movie.
Yeah.
Because I love how they recap Thor: The Dark World, because it's like they knew that people don't really like this movie, but the way they recap when Thor's like telling the story and making fun of dark elves, ooh.
It's actually an angry sludge. Somebody called it a stone earlier.
Then he starts getting more and more sad, and Tony starts trying to take him. He's like, "No, I'm not done yet." Yeah.
He's really good at playing Thor's like strangely broken confidence.
Yeah. So yeah, having that resolution I thought was neat, and even him getting Mjolnir back. That's how you pronounce it, right?
I think it's Mjolnir.
Mjolnir. I know how to spell it better than I know how to pronounce it, which is
John
weird.
Malkovich.
Mjolnir.
Meal ticket.
Meal ticket. Yeah, so when he gets that, I'm still worthy. You know?
I'm still worthy, and you feel for him even though it's silly. Like
Yeah. Okay, that's resolved, and then also.
And then all I could think is there's a Thor on this timeline who's gonna be really pissed about his hammer.
Yeah, my hammer. Yeah. It's true. They have to return all the stones, but shouldn't they return the hammer?
Maybe he does. Maybe Cap takes it back.
He does. Oh yeah, at the end of the movie, he does take the hammer back.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true. Yeah. They
good.
fucking
See?
thought about everything.
There you go.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
And he can, which was one of the most rewarding surprises that we will get to later.
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
And then okay, so before we get to the Nebula moment, but when Hawkeye and Black Widow are at Vormir,
That place that looks and sounds like a Lord of the Rings place.
this to me, I think this whole sequence worked better the second time. I still I do have issues with it when it leads up to the ultimate moment.
Yeah.
That's to me, this is like, I clearly have close to zero issues with this movie, right? But for me, I think the first time I watched it, I just didn't buy it until when everyone came back, and I'm like, oh, she really is dead. You know? Like that.
Yeah,
That's when I was like, oh, never mind. Because I thought like, oh, we're gonna solve this mission, and then she's gonna come back. So I don't really feel the weight to this moment. But even the second time watching it, because we did that opening sketch that I had seen that scene a gajillion times with Thor and Gamora in order to try to get it down. And by the way, if you made it 30-something minutes into here, go check out our opening sketch. Yeah. So when you do get to that specific moment, it's kind of redoing that. It's redoing the Thor and Gamora, the Thanos and Gamora scene, but with different dynamics, because you got different characters in here.
Yeah.
And I think it was smart to have it be two personal characters, because if it was like, Rhodey and Nebula, it's like, yeah.
Well, it won't work.
It won't work because it's not personal. It's not
has
something
to
you
be
love.
Somebody,
Yeah.
It's like, what do I have with me here that I love?
It just felt like it was moving so fast before it got to that moment, and I could kind of get the conflict of the editing and the writing of that, because you're like, we already saw like the setup of this in Infinity War. We can't just redo it completely, the whole similar kind of setup, because you're kind of just moving fast past all these things. Okay, Red Skull's back, da 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 da. Then it starts to slow down a bit when they're having a debate of who should die, And I really appreciate the choreography of that sequence and the way they scripted that whole thing out, where they're trying to like out suicide each other the whole time.
And they take care too to make it so that truly it does seem like, in a sense, Hawkeye does let her go, or I mean, she gives the kick, but to have it be ultimately that it ends up he's holding on to her, he's tied to the cliff, he knows what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like that really drives that home, rather than if one of them had just jumped.
And while I thought the acting was wonderful there, and I really
Other scenes.
I started to feel for it once it started going, but I think just because of how it led into it, of how it was like very fast paced, that there wasn't enough breathing room to really settle into the fact that they're here. I just didn't really, for some reason, I know it hits a lot of people. I know that, but for some reason it doesn't really hit me. I appreciate it. It works, but I don't really feel for it.
Exactly. Yeah. And for me, I think it's a couple of things. I mean, there is the element of the fact that I empathize with both of them. I like both their performances, but as characters, there are a lot of other characters that I'm just more attached to. I know more about. I've spent more personal time with.
It's also the thing of Black Widow of how she really hasn't got her due.
Yeah, she has. I feel like those characters could have been more of characters, and that would have helped. But also, too, I don't dislike the way it is proportioned into the story, but it is one of the very few moments in this movie that I think both times kind of I was like, when they showed back up, I was like, oh, that's right, they're on a mission too. They're still here. And then when they show back up, that's kind of the end for them.
Yeah.
Or at least, for Black Widow, it's that sequence. And so it is just kind of this iceberg out in the middle of the rest of these things happening with Cap and Tony.
True.
And so, I feel like maybe certain things could have been removed from that plot line a little bit to save some time. Like maybe there was a little more time on Rocket's ship en route to Vormir or something like that. But yeah, ultimately, it's like I liked everything they included. I just didn't feel a ton of the impact.
Yeah. So then you get to like Nebula and Rhodey on the Guardians of the Galaxy 1 planet.
On
what is that planet name? Whatever.
No, damn. Yeah. It'll come to me.
That is one of my favorite of different moments of this where you see the same scene from a different perspective.
Yeah.
When you cut away, because you're back in the moment of Star-Lord dancing and that awesome introduction to Chris Pratt in Guardians 1 having a great time, but then you cut away to Rhodey and Nebula's perspective, where he just looks silly because he's singing to himself and there's no music to hear it. It just looks dumb. I thought that was really funny. But I also loved the way they toyed with the way Nebula works, of how, it's like, they set up that at this point in time, there's Nebula and Gamora and Thanos all looking for the stone right now. But I did not see that coming at all, and it made sense for the way Nebula is programmed. And by the way, this is the best Nebula we've gotten.
Oh, hands down.
When Nebula's memory server starts connecting to old Nebula,
Yeah, that was one of there are a couple times in this movie where plot elements show up, and you're like, oh, this is a stretch, but I thought they paid that off pretty nicely too.
Because you got rid of Thanos, you're having all this fun with the time travel. They're handling business.
Yeah.
And then, oh shit, Thanos is back.
Yeah.
And now Thanos knows way more, and they have no idea that Thanos knows all this.
Because Thanos has been tinkering with his daughter and making her some kind of cyborg. Now we've got this shared network.
And they have done such a great, distinct job of establishing. Like, I remember in Guardians 1 that Nebula was a villain.
Yeah.
She was a bad guy, and then now she is a good person. But she still even has some darkness now. Whatever.
She has fun with Tony.
By Guardians 1, she was bad, right? So having that old version of Nebula not being the understanding person or whatever, wanting to do the right thing or do the good thing and just please her dad, made so much sense. I like getting back to like really tough warrior Gamora. And so that plot line I thought was really, really, really well done.
Yeah.
Because that was such a clever way to bring back Thanos so we can still get the Thanos finale battle that we all were expecting,
And that's another surprise because it's just cool that sadly on the heels of what we said about Hawkeye and Black Widow, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed seeing Rhodey and Nebula together. And then once they kill Thanos at the top, you're like, I don't know exactly what his presence is going to be in this movie. And then, to have like a fully in his prime with his daughters Thanos from a few years back, like seeing what's happened here and gaining an even better plan. Like, once things started going to time travel and shit started to hit the fan, like this movie just kept on doing things where I'm like, let's mess up these plans and make some risky choices and really make the stakes tangible.
Yes.
It's like, wow, we only get a few shots of this. We only got a couple Pym particles.
Yeah.
And that too, I guess, because, this is the part of the plot where everything kind of starts to go awry. You also have the bit with, since Tony, everything went wrong, he has to go back and he and Cap both have to go back to the military base. And break in there because they have another idea of when the stones might have been there. And you get the great foreshadowing of Peggy Carter in that little moment with Cap, as well as the run-in with Howard Stark.
And you get the Stan Lee cameo.
And
who I thought was Mark Maron at first.
He's gonna start having cameos instead.
The first time I watched it, like everyone applauded. I'm like, "What's Mark Maron doing?" I'm like, "Oh wait, that's Stanley." Yeah.
Yeah, no. The Russo brothers were on WTF just this week.
Didn't it look like it looked a little bit like Mark
It
Maron?
did, yeah. He had to go to the mustache and
Yeah. So yeah, that whole thing I really do I thought was great when he does, because that's another thing with Tony that he gets to have closure on. Is I love, in like Age of Ultron, how Joss Whedon was trying to mislead you with being like, hey, Hawkeye's gonna die,
Yeah.
like, and he acknowledged that, like, that he wanted to intentionally have you think that. What was cool here is that they are setting up that Tony's journey is going to be complete by the end of this movie. They are setting that up, even having his resolution with his father, which is, we all know, has been a very, very complicated relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that was so neat to have that in here, where they do have that resolution. Is Back to the Future too, like George McFly, Marty McFly,
Yeah.
Having that element there. But some of their dialogue too, I thought was great. What was that exact line when he says, like, my dad gave me some pretty good advice?
Oh, something about no amount of money ever bought a second of time or something like that.
Yes, because he does have that line in there about, I hope I have a daughter. Howard says that, I hope I have a daughter because I don't, she wouldn't end up like me.
Yeah.
Like, what's so bad about that? And it's cool to see that Tony has ultimately outgrown who his dad even was. Like, his dad was a great guy, but it
he says, I never did anything for the greater good, beyond myself or whatever. And Tony has gone from being that guy to becoming the total opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
The guy Howard Stark maybe regrets not being.
Which is beautiful. Yeah. I mean, sure, we get some cool little nuggets of cameos. You see Hank Pym back there.
Yeah, with some de-aging.
Yeah.
Not all the de-aging is perfect, but it was nice to see 70s. Hank Pym.
And of course, also within this time travel element, you do get, I love that Tilda Swinton came back for a significant role. Some of these guys come back for just a cool cameo. But you do get what I liked what they did with the cameos, other than, Robert Redford. Most of the I like Robert Redford's cameo, but characters like Thor's mom or Tilda Swinton, these are characters who have been killed off. So they really gave them a scene.
Yeah, totally.
They gave them a real moment to shine. Whereas, like, we know Hank Pym is still alive. He's fine. And you see him at the end, he's fine. So we don't need a full-on scene with Hank Pym here. But let's give a full scene, an integral moment to the Ancient One, and having that element in there, and the way they discuss things too, and her reasoning to give the Time Stone over to Bruce Banner, I thought was really well done. As well.
This movie bothers to have a lot of debates about everything it's trying to do.
Yeah.
Which is really smart in a day and age of, and I know they said this of their previous films, of honest trailers and pitch meetings and things that really dissect your movie heavily. I feel like they're good at kind of planning for those things and really having the discussions, walking around inside these moments.
So when they get, when they get all the...
And that answers a plot hole, too, of, like, if this order's been here, where were they in 2012?
Yeah. I mean, you see, it's cool that you do see that she actually was helping in the battle.
Yeah, exactly.
She was fighting all the Chitauri ships and stuff. And then when they get back, when they get all the stones, I don't know. How do you feel about the... You know how in Infinity War they said this whole setup about with the dwarves, and they had to build the gauntlets in order to handle these stones, and then Stark technology kind of has a handle on.
That was a bit convenient to me, and I feel like
the first time I watched it didn't bother me. First time I watched it,
yeah. I feel like they can easily chalk that up to, well, Tony's just that brilliant. Like, that's how they were able to sell me the whole time travel moment. Other than the way they handled it, I'm like, well, I know Tony's that brilliant, and I'm sure that anything he needs to create, he'll figure out.
But it's also not perfect.
Yeah,
because like when Hulk uses it, he's like suffering with it,
Yeah, and so I wonder. I mean, you see it with Thanos, and it does roughly, at least on the second snap, the same thing that it does to Hulk. And so I did kind of wonder, because it seems like in Infinity War they're like, no, only an instrument forged in this specific foundry with our star juice and all that stuff could handle the power of all 6 stones. And so, that I was uncertain about a little bit. But,
But either way, Hulk does the snap.
Nanotech.
I love the way they handle the return. We'll go into it. But they do the snap, right? And if you look at the way it plays out, Ant-Man starts looking outside, seeing like the birds. It's kind of beautiful out here. Life is returning. And then Clint gets a call from his wife on his cell phone.
Yeah.
You're like, it must have worked, right? It must have worked. And that shot of like, I think it's Hulk who's looking up, and he's looking through the glass. You just hear
And
because the nebulas have switched, and you just see this missile shot, but there's no audio. Beautiful use of sound design, and then
so devastating.
the Avengers Tower blown
The
up.
Avengers HQ is decimated.
Yeah.
Literally, like, and that was one little nitpick I had both times. Was I was like, I'm pretty sure somebody would have died in this attack. Scott Lang would have died. He's got his helmet off.
Well, the second time
his head would have blown apart.
The second time I watched it, I noticed he instantly. It's kind of reflex for him to just hit that button.
Oh, does it come back?
Yeah.
On? Okay.
Yeah, he hits.
All
He
right,
shrieks.
all
He
right.
hits the button.
Okay.
So you see him go like really, really fast.
Okay.
And I think they kind of set that up well when they first saying like, we only got 2 test runs on this early on in the movie, and then he accidentally uses it.
One test
showing how easy it is for him to just hit it.
Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, if anyone, Hawkeye should have been the one who died. Yeah.
Yes,
if anyone, it should
Yeah,
have been him.
totally.
And then now we're in the epic Act 3.
We're in the end game now.
Where it's like it's just been building and building and building and building, and I didn't watch any of this movie going, where's all the action, like
No, because it's still because
it's so
it's
gripping.
a time heist.
Yeah.
It's got a whole bunch of other stakes and tensions to make you just excited the whole time.
It's so character driven, and then it's kind of cool to see that Nebula is actually making Daddy happy right now.
Yeah, she's gaining favor. She's being cunning.
Yeah, and you see the 3 characters, right? You see Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor. Like, what's he doing there? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I love when Thor, decides to, they decide like, okay, let's fuck this guy up.
do
Let's
it.
kill him.
It's our shot.
I love how he morphs into sort of this like Viking look.
Yeah, he's
about
got
him.
the braids and his beard, and his hair's a little different.
Like the overweight look works for the Viking look for him. It feels like very like warrior to me.
I think TJ or somebody pointed out he looks like his one of the guys on his team. He looks like the chubby guy on his team.
Yeah. Who got killed off in Ragnarok?
Got killed off and never acknowledged.
So he has that very Viking aesthetic to him, but he's also wielding both Stormbreaker
And Mjolnir,
and Moneypenny. He's wielding both of those at the same time. And when they have that fight with him, I mean, it's a really great fight. I did feel at first that the stakes. At first, I felt the stakes were a little bit lessened because he doesn't have the gauntlet. You watch the first movie where he has the gauntlet. You're like, how the fuck are you going to beat this guy when he has a gauntlet? And he has a few stones. He doesn't have all the stones when they're fighting. When in Infinity War, when you have like Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Star-Lord all going after him. But here, it's like, this is just an older version of Thanos. But what was cool about it is
He's got his big knife.
you get to see the warrior side of Thanos here.
You get to see why he's scary anyway.
Yeah, like how he doesn't need that gauntlet to be awesome. Because in Infinity War, all you get is him versus Hulk.
Yeah.
And then here, you're like, you get more of that.
I mean, like they cut away. I think it's funny because in a lot of the action scenes, they cut to other stuff when they take off. But you get that one really awesome like comic book shot of like Tony jumps up, shoots some lasers at him. Cap and Thor, they're all attacking him at once, and it's very picturesque.
It's great, and you got the cool moments with Hawkeye in the tunnel.
Yeah,
man, Hawkeye is so cool in this movie. This is the best Hawkeye for sure. Like undoubtedly the best Hawkeye.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the freaking epic moment in here, which felt reminiscent of The Force Awakens to me when Rey gets the lightsaber. But when this one, it's set up, I love how they pay off so much in here.
It's such a wonderful moment.
When Cap gets the hammer,
that was one of the biggest cheers.
you
both
cannot
times.
help but cheer.
Yes,
because they've set up. They had the rewarding moment where Thor gets his hammer back. You had that rewarding moment, so you just assume it's Thor's grabbing the hammer, right?
Yeah.
You just assume it. But then when Cap has it, and then with Thor to go, I knew it. It's so wonderful.
And it's what we all like, and that's a great moment because at least for me, I was thinking that too. I was like, I knew you were worthy, Cap. I knew you had it in you.
Because to me, the most memorable scene in all of Age of Ultron is the scene
that
where they're all
scene
trying to
where
pick up the
they're all
hammer,
trying to pick
and then Cap slightly moves it.
Yeah.
I love how they pay that off, and the fact that he's like switching, because you get such a cool moment. You get Thor double wielding with Stormbreaker and the hammer, and then you get Cap with the shield and the hammer.
And he takes off, he flies with uppercuts,
summons lightning from the sky,
and just starts kicking Thanos' ass.
Great, it's so cool,
and it's so cathartic because of everything that happened in the previous movie, and the way he has gotten the upper hand in this movie too.
And then Russo's knowing like, okay, so someone's gonna die. We all know that. Like one of these main characters is gonna die, right? And then when Cap loses, half of his shield is broken, and then he does the whole cock in his shield. You get this beautiful, epic shot. It's like a painting.
It's like that. It's like some of those shots out of Ragnarok. Yeah.
Where you see Cap in the corner, broken shield, and then just Thanos' whole army coming.
And just this crest of just daylight and soot.
I cannot emphasize this enough. The way they handled the characters returning, it was so fucking beautiful and rewarding. I can't emphasize it enough, because when Infinity War happened and that decimation occurred, all of us were like, well, we know they're all going to come back. It's not really a big deal. And I was there. I was in that conversation. I was like, there's going to be some cop-out maneuver of how they do it, The Russos handled it so clever that I completely forgot that they might all be back, It's like, they did the birds, and then someone gets a phone call. Hawkeye gets the phone call. But when Cap was looking out, you're like, oh man, there's no way Cap can handle all this, And
this is the end. It's all done.
Yes.
We came as far as we could, team.
I'm so in the moment. I'm like, I have no idea how they're going to do this.
Yeah.
And then Cap, come in. It's Falcon.
Yeah.
It's Sam.
On your left.
On your left. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like, they made it so rewarding. It's more than just, we knew this would happen. You forget about it. Yeah. You're so in the moment that when they do it, it's an emotional payoff. When Black Panther, Shuri, Black Panther's mom, when they all show up through Doctor Strange's like a little
time portals.
Yeah, when they show up, man, that brings tears to my eyes. It really does. I'm so moved by that moment. And then they all start showing up. It's funny to me because it's so rewarding when they're all showing up. Star-Lord flies in, Spider-Man swoops in. It's so badass. All of Wakanda shows up.
M'Baku was in there. I saw him.
Yeah, no, everyone's there. Because in
Mm-hmm.
Infinity War, you have like most of, other than like Ant-Man and Hawkeye, you have everyone there, but they're not all together. They're all separate spots. Where here, they're all here. I'll admit, I got a little distracted because I was so aware of how so many people showed up to shoot shit in front of green screens and I had no idea what they were shooting for.
So there is a certain element of characters who just popping up and you kind of get the sense it's like, it could be anywhere. They're all like looking around like, oh shit,
you're like, most of you guys weren't on the same stage at this time, were you?
Most of you were here for an hour just to pop up, look around, and then you called
and you had
it a day.
no idea how this would factor in. You didn't know what was going on.
For the DVD or something, I don't know.
But that whole battle, I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful battle with a lot of moments that really, really stand out to me. It's like, you get the huge cast. You actually get to see Hulk running and charging after the team, I mean, I love those. It was that shot is in Civil War and a lot of battle movies, where they're all running after each other. But they do that in Civil War, another Russo brothers Marvel film, but this time on a much more epic scale.
And with a very different visual outcome, because it is so rewarding to watch, as instead of, the advancing, forces overpowering them, it's just our heroes pushing them right back,
Yeah. And I even picked this up for the second time I watched it when something about the gauntlet, the Cap says something like, he says the word queens. Hey Queens. Yeah. Which is referencing to
Peter Parker.
In Civil War when they're like, where are you from? And so I love that callback right there. Valkyrie riding her
Pegasus.
And even when taking down that ship and going through it with a spear was really fucking cool.
You mean Captain Marvel? Or which?
No. When she has like the spear and she's taking down the ship.
Yeah.
And also
Then you made the big ship.
It's Spider-Man.
Oh, him zipping through and like getting help from everybody, like trying to carry the gauntlet.
And when he
across the
says like
battlefield.
kill mode or whatever that's called.
Oh yeah, activate kill mode.
Yeah, instant kill mode. Because in Homecoming, he says he's like, no.
No. Why would you have that?
And then here he uses it. Because
to good effect.
He has no choice but to. And also Spider-Man reuniting with Iron Man.
Yeah.
That moment when they hug each other, it's so beautiful.
His surrogate son.
Yeah.
Probably inspired the turn to having this family, and in some ways he's got a picture of it.
He's kept the photo of him.
And you know that the loss of Peter is a huge weight on his conscience for the whole movie.
The most badass Scarlet Witch moment in any of these movies.
Yes.
Because she nearly kills him.
Yeah.
It's to the point where Thanos panics. And because like my girlfriend is obsessed with the Scarlet Witch character and has really hated the fact that we never got to see the full potential of her powers in any of these movies, and that like Scarlet Witch could take down Thanos, and this movie shows you she could take down. She could have if she was one-on-one with Thanos and there was no battle, she would have won no problem. Because when she's using her full power and he starts freaking out, and he's like he says like Hail Mary or something.
Oh, Hail Fire
Hail
or something.
Fire.
Yeah, he gives a command.
He's basically saying just drop all
Firestorm. Yeah.
And then Ebony Maw's like the troops. She's like just do it, not just aim at her like
drop.
I'm gonna die.
Fire,
just fucking give me like help me, you know.
Yeah.
But really showing the full extent of her powers. Is there any other moments we're missing before Captain Marvel shows up?
I don't.
Fucking Star-Lord and Gamora reuniting.
Oh yeah, and she hits him in the nutters again.
Yeah, it's a good nugget of a moment right there.
Yeah, and it does remind you of the reality that like, oh, even though this is a nice reunion, the Gamora that existed on this timeline is ostensibly still not with us? Question mark? We don't know.
Yeah, that's true. And then when Captain Marvel shows up, when they all start shooting at something in the sky, and they're like, what are they shooting at?
Yeah.
Captain Marvel takes out the big ship. That's a fucking cool Captain Marvel. That was a great Captain Marvel moment. Yeah.
Just because they do a great job of making the ship look so huge and terrifying.
Yeah.
And then she just flies through it a couple times. And really, is like crucial. And I actually really appreciate her involvement in this movie because
They use her sparingly,
They use her sparingly, but they use her in significant moments that make sense and that are appropriate, I think, in the larger context because they really don't hand this movie to her because she is of the future phases. I mean,
even when you think she's gonna be the thing that solves this whole thing.
Yeah,
when you think that,
And partway through, I mean, she even says, "You're not going to see me for a while," and they keep to that. And I'm a person who likes the Captain Marvel movie, but for this film, I feel like her involvement was really nice because it was significant, but really all the characters we've been with for 10 years are the ones that we are, really giving all the moments in the spotlights to. So even she is not the linchpin,
But she also gets to lead the ultimate feminism moment of this whole movie.
She does get to lead that moment where all the female
characters
Peter.
like, we're all here.
Yeah.
Let's all charge together.
Yeah.
we all, there's where all the women are. Let's all go over here.
Let's all go help Peter Parker out. Let's all give him an escort.
I mean, that they do that in Infinity War, but that's just 3 women.
This is every single one.
This is all the women here.
There's a lot of them anyway.
That's one of those things where you're like, unlikely, but fuck it, it's cool.
You're like, I understand who and what this moment is for, and for that I appreciate it. But yes, this is very ham-fisted. Yes, I like female heroes too.
I'm on both sides. I'm like, I know it's ham-fisted. They know it's ham-fisted.
For the greater good, I will allow this.
Yeah, they know it's ham-fisted, but I'm totally cool with it.
It's cheesy cool.
I love the exchange where like Peter Parker is so nervous to be around Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Hi, Peter Parker. Yeah.
You got something for me?
Even when Cap Marvel and Thanos are fighting each other, and I love that when he headbutts her and it does nothing.
And nothing happens. That was good. Yeah, totally.
So fucking fun. That whole battle was great, and then even the little minor exchange where Iron Man says like to Doctor Strange, like, you said there was one chance. Is this it? If I tell you, you won't.
It won't happen. And this time I thought it was a time travel, or the first time I thought it was like a time travel thing, but then I realized, if I tell you what you really gotta do, this really might not. It might fuck up your mind.
I mean, that choice. Also, really quick, I love how Chris Evans actually said Avengers Assemble.
Yeah.
Even though I don't don't think it actually makes sense in context for that moment. I'm like, you already are assembled.
This is a
Shouldn't it be Avengers
ceremonial-
charge?
Yeah. And I mean, you only just found out they were here.
Yeah.
It's not like you called them. It's not like
But a good fan service.
but yeah,
moment,
no,
right?
it was very rewarding.
Yeah. But when Thanos and Iron Man do go toe to toe, because you're like, who's gonna die here? Who's gonna die? And when Iron Man does, it's really well handled because Thanos does a snap and it just clinks.
Yeah, well, and I love the lead up to that too because it reminded me it's another one of those mirror moments where in Infinity War it's like Cap's got the gauntlet, and then this one Captain Marvel has the gauntlet trying to stop it, and then Tony jumps in, and that whole ruse I thought was really nice, especially in the way they time it out.
Yeah,
because he's got his hand on the glove and all that, and it was perfect because I never saw it coming. With of course Tony has a backup. You
didn't see that coming?
Yeah.
Evan Peters, Quicksilver.
Yeah. Quicksilver from this universe.
No, when really quick, backtracking just a tad bit, trying to remember my thought here. Oh yeah, with Thanos, the whole "I am inevitable" thing, because before Iron Man says his final line, when he says "I am inevitable," the second time I watched it, I really picked up on it, of that theme of Thanos in here, because they kill off Thanos in the beginning of this movie in this timeline, and yet he still comes back ready to retrieve the stones.
Yeah,
it's like no matter what they do, it's inevitable.
Yeah.
They're gonna go toe to toe with this guy when it comes to these stones. I love that running theme, and also the way he does, like when Tony is accepting his sacrifice moment, because before that, it's really cool when I forget the name of whatever the Gwyneth Paltrow version of Iron Man is, Pepper Potts version. I forget the specific name of it. Something with an R, I think. Whatever. That was cool. Some people question, like, how did she get a handle on it? I'm like, well, it's been 5 years. Maybe she, like, fucked around with them. It's been
Maybe
fun.
she's tried on one of his suits before.
I'm like,
I don't know.
maybe she has. Like, who cares?
I
Who
had
cares?
that thought too, but also who cares?
It's been like 5 years. Maybe she tinkered around with it at some point, right?
We're capping a lot of stuff off here. We're paying some sentimental moments off.
When Iron Man does, the way he says it, like accepting his full completion of this character, I am Iron Man, and he snaps. Everyone starts decimating away from the 2014 timeline. I love how Thanos
sits
down, accepting
like
his failure, because everyone's always like, you couldn't accept your failure. He's accepting his failure, and he slowly gets to decimate away, which was cool. Maybe Tony did think that. Like, let him really suffer on this one.
I want him to go last, really last.
And I wasn't sure what would happen to Tony. I'm like, maybe he's fine. But then when you see how burnt up he is, like, oh damn, no, he's.
They
fucked.
let you figure that out.
He's fucked, and then the main people get to say goodbye to him. You get to start off with Rhodey, his best buddy. Rhodey gets to say goodbye to him first, or like I was like worried about him. There's the reversal with Spider-Man and Tony, as opposed to Infinity War. You get the reversal there. When I cry, I'm gonna cry. I can't think about it actually. The time when I cry, because both times I've seen it, I don't really tear up at that moment. But the time when I fucking start to bawl is when Pepper checks like the vitals of his suit, and realizes he's gonna die.
Yeah,
and goes and says, "We're okay now. You can rest." Oh shit. Okay. Well.
Yeah.
It says you're okay now. We can rest. Every time when that happens, where she's like, "I'm not gonna tear up. I'm gonna wait.
I'm gonna wait.
I want him to just rest now." Right there. Oh man, I start fucking bawling. He dies when she starts. Both times I'm a wreck when I watch that scene. Yeah, like that was like the most beautiful way to handle the death. I love how the last line of Iron Man 1 is "I am Iron Man." His last line here, other than the message that he leaves for his daughter, his last living line is "I am Iron Man" here. So it's a great completion of his character. That moment is really fucking works perfectly handled.
And it's well timed. It has all the impact you want it to, and the subsequent funeral as well.
Yeah, where all the characters are
All
CGI'd.
the characters.
But no, even having
tracking shot.
even having on the lake of Tony Stark does have a heart.
That
moment.
little pyre they put out.
Yeah, harkening back to part 1, that Pepper gave him, and then and then you're just cutting to all the characters,
the different important people,
even Hank Pym being there, who never really liked Stark.
Yeah. Well, and like Black Panther's there, and even the little boy from Iron Man 3.
Iron Man 3
up.
kid is there.
Looking sexy.
That was wonderful. His goodbye to his daughter, I thought was great. I
Nice.
wonder if they'll ever. I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow said she's done with with the MCU, but maybe she'll come back. It's too
I'm sure
bad.
everyone has
I mean,
an option to return somehow.
It's crazy because Iron Man dying has been teased so many times. Avengers Assemble, freaking Captain America: Civil War, even Infinity War. So many moments that he's gonna die, and like how he's willing to sacrifice himself. And here, after he's completed his full selfless arc, he does ultimately sacrifice himself for everyone. And I love that his motive was, I don't want to change the timeline. I just want to bring people back to I just want to bring them all back here, which I thought was beautiful because he was the one who had the most intent. He's the one who figured this out. He's the one who was the last one who wanted to do any of this. But he did it for the greater good, just like how his father said his father wouldn't do that, and he showed he outgrew him. Beautiful. It's hard as fuck for me to imagine this franchise without Tony Stark. And I mean, a long time ago, I did say like he has to die. Like if they're gonna complete this, he has to die. And I respect them for killing him off. It is very difficult for me to imagine him not being in this franchise. But what a way to go. And Robert Downey Jr. is financially set for life. So, yes.
And then some. And then some.
So we're going to get that Sherlock Holmes 3 off the ground finally.
Woo! And then you get the coda with Cap taking back all the stones and stuff like that.
What are you talking about?
You know, the post credits scene.
Yeah, that was great because I love how Tony dies, but Cap doesn't die. He gets to lose his virginity.
Yeah, he does.
That's what they should have come back to at the end. Him doing it with
Wow, that's my first time.
But yeah, I mean,
I could do this all day.
I can do this all day.
Oh, buddy. Buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't pick up on it the first time that Bucky knew what Cap was gonna do, but the second time I watched it, pay attention to the dialogue when Bucky does say, "I'm gonna miss you, man."
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, but he flat out knows that he knows his plan. I think Cap ran it by him. But yeah, so when Cap shows up as looking like Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, which was interesting because I wondered a lot about how they achieved that effect because it looked like some combination of like
makeup and old aging. Yeah,
and I almost wondered if maybe they did some like stitching, like put his face onto like an older guy's body but in a makeup, but then that was assisted by CD. It was weird. It was like in some ways I liked it better than some of the de-aging, although I still noticed it was some sort of effect. But I liked old Cap, and I liked the way he the mannerisms and the voice and all that.
Yeah, and I love how he gave the shield to Sam at that moment, which is kind of, I mean, it makes you wonder about the future of whatever it is. I heard they're doing that, Falcon and Bucky show, and I felt like they were always setting up for Bucky to be Captain America. The thing is, though, with Sam as Captain America, he doesn't have any superpowers. Yeah. Where Captain America often relies on his ability of super strength and agility, like all these things that make Captain America.
Crazy fast metabolism.
You kind of have to have this level. I don't know the comics of that to that degree to know if Sam is Captain America and like how he does it. Does he get some serum injection or something? I don't know, but I still think it was a cool handoff. And bottom line, it's more than focusing on the handoff to Sam. It's the send-off of Captain America.
Yeah. And that was really what I was hoping for. I mean, it's funny. Going into this movie, I was expecting the opposite thing to happen. Where like, oh, okay, I would expect that Tony will retire so that he can come back whenever he wants, but he doesn't have to be here. And then Captain America will sacrifice himself or something like that. And I really loved
that they switched it.
That they switched it and that Cap gets to go back and gets to just have a life with his love after all of this time fighting and sacrificing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I probably would have been a little upset if Cap sacrificed himself because I have always joked about how he's never gotten to just enjoy his life.
Yeah, and Tony very much has.
Like he gets these powers, he's in the ice forever, he just goes right back to being Captain America, super soldier. I don't think he's ever lost his virginity, like he's ever got to have a dating life, like none of that. And he's always been hung up on the same woman for all these years, the love of his life.
And he's not of this time.
He's not of this time, and then he gets to go back and course correct his own time, his own life.
Yeah.
which I thought was beautiful. I know some people get confused off timeline stuff, but without really going into that, I thought as a send off to this version of Captain America, I thought it was beautiful. It's absolutely. This movie hit all the right marks. Even being like, no, I don't want to tell you about who this woman is that I married. But then going back to the past and watching them have the dance. Yeah. They bring it full circle, man. Fucking
circle.
Brilliant. And that post-credit scene.
Oh yeah, with the clanging, with the pounding metal sound, which at least Mr. Sunday Movies theorized was perhaps a nod to the original Iron Man when he's pounding the metal sheets in the cave.
Yeah.
But who knows, man? Maybe there's so much that we can decode from this, and we just don't know it yet.
It's funny because
The future of the MCU, it's all going to be sound. It's no visuals.
I love that there's no post-credit scene. I'm like, no, there shouldn't be a
It
post-credit
feels
scene.
entirely appropriate to me. It's the closing of a chapter.
Press screening, no one was upset. Opening night, wow, people were like mad.
Yeah.
You could hear like all these people in the crowd like pissed that there was no post-credit scene. And in that moment, I did kind of get why people will be mad, because the post-credit thing is such a signature of the MCU. Started with the first Iron Man movie that I can actually understand if you are mad that there's not anything.
Yeah.
You literally could have done anything. You could have
put a joke
you could have
or
done
a cute button.
whatever,
Yeah.
You know how like in Logan spoiler, but in Logan it's just the X of the symbol of Logan above the grave.
Yeah.
Like if they did something like that, or whatever, I don't know. You could have done anything. Could have just been like an image of something.
It's the top of Tony's casket, and then the particles start to lift up a little bit.
Or you could have done like an image of just Stan Lee posing with the whole cast or whatever.
That would have been nice.
You could have done anything. As it stands, I get if you're upset because of everything I just acknowledged.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think it's totally appropriate that we didn't have anything, because this is supposed to close and end. So it's totally fine. Yeah. Anywho, we have covered all of Avengers
We've
Endgame.
literally broken this movie down.
Yeah. I love this movie. If you happen to stay till the end, what is your favorite part of Avengers Endgame? Thank you if you stuck around this whole time. Yeah, where would you rank this? Because it's personally my favorite movie. This is the most time we've dedicated to any Marvel movie for that purpose.
Yup.
You guys can subscribe to the Reject Nation, click that notification bell, and go ahead and check us out on Patreon. We're done. And the AMINO app.
AMINO!
They've sponsored this
Marvel
video.
AMINO!
Thank you guys for sponsoring this video.
Send us your AMINO stars!